Hello there and welcome to today's Delicious Art video class. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoy this class. We've chosen today a picture of a beautiful sunrise on the ocean with seagulls on the beach with beautiful reflections. I really like this picture. I think it's quite peaceful and calm. It's appealing and it just indicates, the start of a new day. And it also gives us an opportunity to look at all the different colours and tones throughout the sky and the reflections in the water. So let's get started. The first part of our class today will be where we start to paint in black and white. So what I like to do in my classes is a charcoal drawing, and that is usually to study the tones. So it gives us a really good idea of where the darkest darks are and the lightest lights, and to distinguish between all of those different tones or values. And then we can convert that into our choices of colour that we choose for the colour version. So today you should have downloaded your PDF notes, which look like this, and you've either been able to print them out or look at them on a screen. You'll also have received the images, this colour version at least, in a JPEG picture. So that gives you an opportunity then to look at your picture on another screen. I have a second screen here on my desk, and being able to zoom in nice and close to your reference photo is very useful, and something that wasn't possible not very long ago. But now we've got computers and technology and screens, we can actually focus right in on all the tiny bits and bobs that are in our pictures. So let's get started. I have here on my desk a board, and I like to work on a board because that means I can just keep my paper taped down onto a nice firm board, and it means that it's not going to move around. So what I've got here is my drawing paper. You can use an art diary or just a plain piece of white paper. And we're going to do the charcoal version on here first, and then we'll move on to our colour fixed paper. And today I've got this blue piece to work on. If you've got a different colour, don't worry about it. We're going to be filling in the whole page today, so it really won't matter. I just picked blue because it kind of matches what we're doing. But any colour will be fine, so we'll pick that one up for later. For now, what we need to do is draw up onto your art diary or drawing paper the same shape that you can see here. This is the shape that we're going to be painting inside today. So it's a landscape format. It's designed to fit onto the colour fixed paper, which is 23 by 30. That's this paper here. It's just a bit bigger than A4. If you're working on A4 paper, then you might need to sort of trim off a little bit of the top of the sky because it'll be slightly too tall for A4. Okay, so just be aware of that. This picture is designed to fit into that colour fix size, which is the 23 by 30 that I've written down here. Okay, A4 is 21 by nearly 30, so it's only 2 centimetres difference. So you could chop 1 centimetre off the top and 1 off the bottom, or 2 off the top, whatever works for you if you want to stick to your A4 size. Okay, once you've drawn up your rectangle, I want you to put a grid line on there. So that is a line down the middle and across the centre. And you'll see on your colour version on your notes that I've put a pink grid line on there so that you can just see it against the blue and determine where everything sits. So the reason we put a grid line on is so that when we do the drawing, we can work out where's the horizon line in relation to the halfway mark. Where do the birds sit in relation to these lines? How far in are they from the middle or up from the bottom? Those sorts of things. So a grid line is a really great way to learn to draw and get everything in the right spot and in proportion. It's not terribly important today as far as all the minor details go because we've got a nice big sky that we can kind of play with. And being clouds, we can kind of do anything really. It doesn't really have to be exactly the same because clouds are different shapes all the time. We never see the same 2 shapes in clouds. So if you don't get it quite right, it really doesn't matter. So draw up your page, put on your halfway marks like that. Keep your black and white picture handy so you can have a look at it while you're working. And if you have the color version, you might be able to convert that to black and white and have two versions on your screen. So you've got your color and your black and white version, and then you can refer to both of them as we go. So the black and white version helps us find tones. So let's have a look first. Grab a long, thin piece of willow charcoal. This is my messy little collection of willow charcoal that I take everywhere. It's got fat, chunky bits. It's got long, skinny bits. I've got shorter, fat bits. I like to have different sizes that I can work with, and you'll see why as we go on. So to start with, I've used a thin, long bit, and that's just to loosely draw up the main shapes that we can see in this picture. So let's look at our grid line and work out where the horizon sits. So you can see the horizon line is just above our halfway mark. Rule of thumb usually in a landscape is to have either 2/3 sky and 1/3 earth, or vice versa. So we've got a little bit more than 1/3 of sky, but that's okay. I'm not going to get too uptight about that rule today. So let's just draw or rule a line. Let's make a ruled line because the horizon line is usually pretty straight across there, and it's just above that halfway mark, isn't it? So I've made it just a little bit above my halfway line. So that means now I know the sky's up in this part and the ocean or the water and the sand are below that line. Okay. So if you want to rub out that grid line, I like to rub it out because I get a bit distracted sometimes. You can get confused with if you've got it too close to your other lines. So if we rub out our grid now using a kneadable eraser, so I don't know if you've tried these before, but they're really handy for charcoal and pastel, and they are great for removing pastel off pastel paper, but it's also really good for taking charcoal out. And we'll use this a little bit in this instance to get some light back into the sky and the water where we might put too much charcoal down and you want to get the light back in. So a kneadable eraser is really handy, so have that nearby. All right, let's look at the shapes in this sky. What we're going to be looking at are the shapes of the lights and the darks, and we're just going to loosely draw in those little shapes of dark. So starting up here in the top left corner, I'm just going to draw in some of those shapes. There's sort of this little dark area of cloud up here. So just shade that in lightly. We're just going to be shading in lightly where you can see the greys. Try to leave the white or the light areas unfilled. But if you do fill them in, don't stress because we can put them back with our kneadable eraser. So see that interesting little shape up the top there? I'm just shading it in lightly, just doing soft little swishy marks like this to get that lovely, soft, quite kind of fluffy feeling into my clouds. Okay, and now if we come down a little bit, you can move down here and you can see that it's not quite so dark as we come down. So just going down softly, softly like this. So sort of a lighter grey in that area there. And can you see there's a really distinct shape that comes across like this from the sky? So we've got the dark area on that top left. It's lighter on the right. And then as you come down, we're shading in. So finish shading in that area. I'm going to smudge it with my fingers a little bit. So just smudging my fingers a little bit over that to soften everything off. I want everything to be really soft in the sky because the clouds are soft, aren't they? And I'll just show you what you can do with a kneadable eraser. So I've picked up my kneadable eraser. You can actually shape it. So if you shape it into sort of a rounded end, not too pointy, but something like that, then you can kind of use it to take out some of the charcoal. So see how that lightens up a little bit when I touch it on there? So I can take some of that out. So it's a really handy tool, especially for clouds. It's brilliant for clouds. And you can actually remove some of the charcoal out of there and get your lights back in or get the paper colour back in. So keep that eraser handy. We'll be using that a little bit more. Now let's look at the shape in here. We can see there's a really big, wide, dark shape right across the middle of the sky there, isn't there? It's a very dark, wide cloud. So let's see if we can figure out where that goes. So it sits at about this high, and it kind of comes across. It's got a little dip down there, and it comes across and sort of wafts over here to the left. Okay, and then it's got another bottom section. So I'm just drawing that wide shape of the cloud through there. Something like that. It's not perfectly straight. It's got soft edges and it sort of dips down here, but it moves across the page and it gives us that lovely wide, darker tone. So now we can darken that off a little bit with our charcoal. So just rubbing that with the charcoal. I'm using a long, thin stick because I can hold onto it loosely. If you hold charcoal like you would a pencil this way, it's hard to get that nice and soft and loose because you haven't got enough movement in your hand and it's tight. Whereas if you pick it up this way, hold it on the end like this, you get a lot more movement and you can get a softer touch on the paper. So just be aware of the way that you're holding your sticks as well, because that's really important. And as we go on and do the pastel work later, you'll see why. Okay, so just darkening off through there. Now that's that big dark shape running across the page, isn't there? Isn't it? Sorry. I'm running out of my words today. While we're over here, I'm going to look at the top shapes up in here. You can see there's some really interesting little sort of lines that go down like that. And there's another little one there and across here. So they're darker as well. They're about the same tone as this middle area that we've just done. I'm just looking at the darker little clouds up here, not at the light areas, but just at those darker spots and marking in loosely those shapes that I can see. So if you mark those in softly with your willow, then we can push it in with fingers and you'll see that you'll create beautiful tones. But before we do that, let's pop over to the right side now. And we've got a bit more tone up here. It's not quite as dark as that middle area that we've just done. So if you find, like I have, if you're starting to fill it in and it's looking the same tone, the darkness of this one, then maybe darken this one off a little bit more. Yeah? So it's really an exercise in noticing your lights and darks. We're really focusing on that today. And we've got this beautiful little angle. So see, everything kind of sits in an angle in this sky up above the top, that dark part, the middle bit. And then I've got a dark splodge of cloud up here on the top right. See how that sort of comes across and then breaks up into smaller pieces, but it's a darker tone than the rest. So very, very interesting noticing all those variations in the tones. Okay. Might have come too far over on that one. But as I said earlier, it doesn't really matter because these are clouds and clouds are always different. They never are the same on any 2 days. Now we've got this marked in. Once you've got that in there, I want you to grab your finger and very lightly just run it across like this. Okay, so we're just going to lightly smudge all of this in a little bit. Don't press too hard because if you do, you'll lose all the definition between those lights and darks that we've worked so hard to make. So just really softly touching it, hardly touching it at all. Just be really soft and hovering your finger very lightly over that and see how that has softened everything off. And so now I can start to see, you know, that little bit of light that's up in here. And you can actually put more in if you want to. So you can grab that eraser now. This is where the eraser comes in handy. Grab the eraser, shape it. So if you want like a knife edge shape, you can make a little blade sort of shape with it. You can knead it. That's why it's called kneadable, because you can knead it into shape. And you'll find that when you've done a few marks with it like that, it'll pick up the charcoal. Can you see the dark on the tip there of the charcoal that I've picked up? So that's why you need to knead it again push that pigment into the eraser, push it around and find a clean edge. And then you can use the edge again because now it's nice and clean, see? Magical. So just come back with the eraser and touch up where you see the really light parts. Okay, something like that. You want to have something like that on your page. Doesn't need to be exactly the same because everybody's got different clouds, but just really noticing the lights and putting some of that back in if you can with your eraser, but keeping it soft. All right. So, and then if you take too much off and you want to get a bit more dark back in, you can just grab your charcoal again, put a bit more back in, or darken off in a couple of areas. It might need to be a bit darker. So really study that tone. Have a really good look at where the darks and the lights and the mids are. This is vital. To create drama in your art, you've really got to get your head around the tone. And don't be afraid of the dark. Some people get a bit scared of putting too much dark into their artwork. But if you don't put enough dark in, you can't get the light. So you've got to have dark to find the light. Okay, so don't be afraid of the dark. I'm just darkening off this center strip that we put in first. It's softened off a little bit, so I'm just going to darken it down a bit more because I want the drama of the dark against the light. Okay. Now we can move down into this bottom area just above the horizon line. So you can see on the right-hand side, it's really light across there, isn't it? We've got a lot of light. And then as we come across to the left, we get a bit more cloud coming down. And so there's sort of stripes of light, but more mid-tone through here. So let's just put some clouds in there, all the way down to that horizon line. And you can see on the horizon line, right at the back there is the ocean, right? So the horizon line we drew earlier is the ocean, right at the back behind all the waves. And then in front of that comes down into the water. So just be aware that's our horizon line, not that really dark bit, because that's actually a wave that sits about here. It sits right on that halfway line. Okay, so that's a wave that goes across there. I'm just drawing it in so you know where I'm talking about. Now it's quite dark, we can't see the detail, but we know that's a wave because this is ocean. Okay, so that area there that I've just darkened, and if you want to do it too, you can, is the wave. And it tapers off a little bit in the middle and gets a little bit higher here across the left side. And then there's a smidge of it on the right there as well. But the horizon line is behind it at the back there. Okay, so down to the horizon line with clouds and just shading them in gently, gently, like that. Okay, and we can soften that off with fingers and take some out if we need to, so don't worry. And then across on this side, it's interesting. We've got some little clouds that kind of sit right on the horizon. Can you see them? They look like mountains right back there. So let's put some shapes in that look like that. These are clouds that are sitting right on the horizon over there, far away in the distance. But they make for an interesting sky. So just marking in some loose little shapes like that. Keep that charcoal nice and loose in your hand and just smudge in those marks, softly, softly like that. And above those marks, we've got quite a lot of light sky, but there's a few little streaks, isn't there, of different tone running through there. So you can kind of mark those in too. So very soft, very gentle little marks through here. Cloud is more on the left. There's a lot more cloud on the left side of the sky in this section. And then the right side has got lots of beautiful light. And then these soft, fluffy clouds that sit right down there on that horizon line. Okay, now we can blur some of this off. So if you've got someone there, just again, very softly, hardly touching the paper, keeping it really soft because we don't want to get too dark. If you push it in too much, it'll all just become the one colour and you'll lose all those variations of tones. And if that's happened, and it's happened over here for me a little bit, again, you can grab your eraser, okay, and get some of those light areas back in. I can see there's a bit of light just up here under that dark cloud that we put in before. I want to get a bit more light through there. Just dabbing it with my eraser, reshaping it with my fingers to make a neat, like a knife edge kind of shape. And just doing these little marks to get the light back in. So I've got a little touch of light there on the left side again, just over here. That's a nice little blob of light. And then just on the horizon line, there's a bit of light across there too. So I'm just going to lighten that off on the top of the horizon line. That'll give us that beautiful sunrise coming up behind the horizon, starting to peak above that line. Over on the right side, you might want to take some more out with your kneadable eraser. If you don't have a kneadable eraser, try a different kind. I'm just not sure how effective it would be. It would probably be fine. It'd just get really dirty and then you can't get the dirt off it because you can't knead it. Over on the little clouds over here on the horizon, I'm just going to dab those with my finger. If I push them too much, they'll just get lost and lose their shape. But if you dab softly, that'll just keep it looking quite soft and cloudy. Okay. So we can play around in there for a little minute or two, just noticing the tones, softening things off with your fingers if you have to, putting more dark in where you might see a little bit more dark. There's a little bit of a darkish cloud line here, just to the left of the halfway mark. Some little spots of cloud up there, but I need to get light back in there first. So the drama in the sky is where the light and the dark meet. All right, so we put that dark strip across the middle there, and then right underneath it here in this section is where the light and the dark meet. And that's where you can create beautiful drama. That's where the impact is. That's where the eye will go. When someone first looks at your painting, that's where they'll first look at that and then their eye will wander around it. But the light and the dark, where they meet, that's your drama point. That's in here, just on this side here, dark down into light. And then there are other areas, of course, that have light and dark, but that'll be the biggest one. And then your eye will wander around and look for the others. All right. So now we've got our sky in. I'm pretty happy with how that's looking at the moment. We're not going to spend too much time on this part because we want to get stuck into the colour version. But let's just redraw that horizon line just so we know where that is. And you can see that the water there in the background behind the dark waves is a mid-tone. So it's a little bit darker than the sky above it, okay? So we need to define that a little bit more like that. That's why it's nice to have that light just on the horizon line there. It gives us a nice sharp line. And then the clouds over on the other side, they're a lighter tone than the horizon as well. So we can make sure that we keep those lighter than the horizon so we can see that they're sitting above the horizon line. It's not all merging in together. Tone, 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 so important. I probably made it a bit dark through there. So I can just lighten that off a little bit with my finger. So you'll notice when you put your fingers into willow charcoal, it actually gets a bit lighter. And then I probably need to lighten off those clouds a tad, so I might just dab a few of those with my eraser to get a bit of light back in there. I don't want the clouds in the background to merge into that horizon because they're a separate thing. In fact, you can see right on the very edge of that line, it's darker, isn't it? So just darken off that edge a little bit more. And then as it comes down, it gets softer. I've just rubbed out my wave then, but that's okay. We can put it back in. Beautiful. There's our horizon line. Important. Make sure you get that nice and straight. If your horizon's crooked, it puts the whole thing off. Okay, now we'll come back down. So we've done that. We've put the water in there across that edge, and then we can come forward and have to put these waves back in. Now let's look at the waves again. They're only little from where we're looking, but we've got a nice big dark wave here. Then it tapers down into the center area, and then we move across to the left, and there's another lovely dark wave there. Okay, so I'm pressing pretty hard with the charcoal now. If you look at the black and white version, you can see this is one of the darkest parts of the whole picture. So we've got some dark cloud up here. Okay, and then the darkest parts are these waves, and then we'll come down into the foreground where there's more darks. But at the moment, those waves, that's the under part of the wave as it's curling, is the darkest area because it's in shadow. So make those nice and dark. Then as we come forward, we've got kind of look like stripes really of light and dark in the water there. So that'll be the foam and smaller waves as they come forward. So we're just going to do a few stripe effects through there of darks and lights. Okay, so I'm just drawing some stripes through there like that. And then I'm just going to grab my finger and run that across to soften it off a little bit. Just soften. Everything in the background is usually softened and blurred, while things in the foreground are sharper. So we don't want everything in the background to be too sharp. We want to keep it fairly soft because it's far away and we can't see it. Okay, there are a few lighter stripes through that water there. So just keep that nice and soft through there like that. And just going back into the wave up here. So see, my horizon line went a bit crooked over there. But just looking at the top of this wave on the right, you can see there's a little bit of lighter water just behind it, which defines the top of the wave. So again, make a knife edge with your eraser and just lighten off that little bit of water behind the wave there. See that section in there? It just makes the wave come forward and helps us see what's happening in this picture. I've lost my clouds up there, but that doesn't matter. I can put them back in later. All right. So just that little bit of light back there brings the waves forward. And we know they're waves because we're at the beach, but it could be sort of almost abstract. Okay, coming forward down through here now, we're working our way down into the sand bay area. So let's have a look at the shape in here. This is an interesting shape. And it sits, where does it sit in relation to our grid mark? So it sits below the halfway line, and I've kept this mark here for my halfway line on the outside of my picture. So I can see it starts about there, goes across to about here, inside this section and that far in from my middle line. So we're measuring with our eye to about there, and then it comes back over here on an angle to about there. So if we draw that shape in like this, that gives us that triangular shape. So that'll be the sand bay, and we can make that nice and dark because it's a very dark area. It's not quite as dark as those waves, but it's pretty close. Make that nice and dark through there. Fill it in with your charcoal, and that'll be our little sand bay. Okay, and then we can see as we come across here, we get this light area on the right in front of the water, and then at the base of about here, you can see there's an area that comes across the picture on a slight angle, so slightly down like that. I'm looking at this line here between the light part of the sand where the reflection of the sky is because it's wet, and down into this shape where the birds are. So it's coming down through there, and this is mid-tone down in through here. Can you see that? So I've left this light, and I'll come back in and fiddle with that in a minute, but this area here is all mid-tone. And we can come down here, just make it all mid-tone. We can get the light back in later, mid-tone down through there. I've got dogs barking next door. I hope they're not interfering with my sound. And then across through here on the left. And let's just put it all down here in, then we can pop the light back in over that. So that's our mid-tone through there. Let's push this in with our fingers. So we're just going to blend that in softly with fingers. I'm pushing a bit harder now because I want to sort of mix it all up and make it a smooth kind of surface. Okay, so mixing it all in like that. Should have removed my halfway mark before because sometimes that can get in the way and muck up your painting. Anyway, doesn't matter. This is just a little practice run. So just smoothing that off now. And then we can come back in and we can really study this area. Let's look at this area here. We'll go back up behind the sandbank in a sec. But just in here, you can see it's a little bit darker. So I'm just going to darken off a little bit more through there. So it's like a darker tone between the sandbank and the birds in there. And you can see the shape then of the reflection in the sand. So I'm going to darken off again a bit more in here. I'll put the reflection in with the kneadable eraser. So I'm not worrying about the light bits at the moment. We can sort that out after. So just keeping that tone a bit darker down through there. Okay. So that's a darker area. And if we just gently, lightly now push that in, you can see I'm pulling my finger in the direction of the water. So if you look at the movement of the water in there, you can see all these little watery lines that sort of go like that, and they're horizontal. So make sure that you move your finger in the direction of the thing that you're painting. So in the clouds, for instance, we did sort of softer movements because they're soft and fluffy. But down here, we're doing horizontal movements to try and pick up that movement in the water. Okay, so that's just very soft, very subtle. Let's go back up behind this sandbank now because we've got a bit more tone to put in there. So just again, looking at your black and white picture, you can see it's a mid-tone through there. And we can smooth that off a little bit as well. Sort of just push it out into this light area over here so that we're making it all joined together. Beautiful, smooth, soft movements. If you're losing some of the darks in the sandbank or somewhere else, just pop it back in. That's easy. Okay. And then just pulling some of the charcoal across over onto that right side because it's not all completely one light tone. It's got a few little shades in there. So we can look at those and softly just mark in a few subtle little shades. Just looking at your sand again, coming across now to the right side. So over here on this section here, it's almost as if the birds are in the light area, except for that little guy on the right. He's sort of in the bit of darker spot on the sand. So darkening that off a little bit through there. And then we've got this really dark section down here in this bottom right corner, haven't we? So that must be the dry sand. So if we draw a line in the shape of that comes across like that, kind of tapers off onto that left side. So in here is where it's darker. So we can darken that down. Again, just keep referring to your black and white picture because that's going to show you all the tones. How nice. So that's what we've done now. We've worked our way down the picture and we've created the darks and the lights. The line between this dark part and the water or the wet sand is blurred. So don't have a hard edge there. It's quite soft because it sort of gently goes from wet to dry. So don't have a hard mark there. Darken it off if you want to make it a bit darker. really looking at the tones. All right, so now we can come back with the kneadable eraser and we can put some light back in here. So let's have a look up in this area here on the right in the sand in front of the water. It's quite light through there. So let's just lighten up a little bit in here. You get some nice bright light through that area. Remember, the light and the dark are what create the drama. So we're lightening off in there, just in this section here. And then you'll find your eraser will get dirty, so you need to find the clean side, give it another shape. And just noticing the tones and working with the eraser on those lights and darks. A little bit of light just in front of this sandbank on the tip of it just there. So it's almost like we're painting with white now, but we're doing it with the eraser. Then we can look at these beautiful reflections down here. So let's have a look at that. What I want to do is make a knife edge with my eraser and then just softly do these little zigzaggy shapes down through here with it. Okay. Like a little zigzaggy shape. We don't want a hard line. And you can see in the shapes, there's sort of dark and lights, isn't there? So you can come back over that with your charcoal and put a little bit more dark through there if you want to, or not, whatever. And then do the same thing over here. So just little broken light bits. It's a bit hard when you've got a chunky eraser. And then you come back and put the darks back in with the charcoal. So I've got two and a bit over here. There's a little bit of light just there on the in between those two. And then we come across and we've got a gap, and then there's a bit more light through here. So again, some sort of zigzaggy shapes through there to get some of that reflection happening. This is where you can look at it and think, oh, I think that needs to actually be a bit darker because my light's not light enough. So that's really interesting because now I'm looking at it thinking, yeah, I need to darken that off a bit. See, so this is why it's really good to study your tone. If we darken this off, that reflection will create more drama. Okay, so we can make that section a bit darker. Yeah. Because we want the drama in your art, not in your life, but in your art you do, unless it's good stuff. Okay, and then this, see that light there, that one there? We want that to look beautiful and light, so we've got to get some dark around it. Okay, that's a bit better. So we can create some drama in here with our lights. And then I'm going to do that nice big one. So it sort of comes about. And again, you can look at the grid line and work out how far in from the middle does that start. And it's about here. And it's a bit higher than that one. And it's quite white just through there. And then it kind of fades off a little bit as it goes down. So I might have to have another couple of goes at making that work. Like that. Just to get those lights in. So see what I mean? If you feel like your light isn't light enough, you need more dark. It's usually what the problem is. If your lights aren't light enough, you've got to get more dark around them. Groovy. Now we're just going to quickly put these little birds in. Now I mentioned, or did I? I'm not sure now. I feel like these birds are too evenly spaced. And so I want to bring this guy a little bit closer to this one so that we haven't got an evenly spaced birds. This guy over here, he's fine, he can stay there, but let's bring these two closer together. So this one sits right on the halfway mark, but if we move him across and maybe put his beak on the halfway mark, then that'll bring him closer to this fella. So this is the tricky bit. This is where we've got to look at the shapes. So let's start with this guy up at the back on the right. Now, don't look at these as if they're birds. It's just a shape. See the shape on that one? If I zoom right in, I can see it looks like this. It's got two stripes like that. And then there's a blob like that, which is the reflection in the sand. Okay. And then it's got a little shape that sort of, it's got a dark tip there. And then it gets sort of, it comes down like that, because this bird is pecking at the water. So it comes down like that, and then the head is there. It's sort of to the side more, but that's the sort of shape we've got to draw. All right. So it's not an actual, we can't see the beak, we can't see the details. It's literally just a little shape in the distance that's got two sticks and a reflection. So let's see how we go. And the head's actually lighter than the body because it's got a bit of light bouncing off the top of it. So if you get it, then we can use the eraser to get a bit of light back in and just define the head in front of the body. Okay, it's all about tone, 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 tone. And there's no dark on that side. So that's what that shape looks like. Let's see if we can put it in over here now. So it sits, where does it sit? It sits about here. So let's put the little legs in. You'll need a skinny bit of charcoal for this, and it's quite little, quite small. Oh, that was not a skinny bit of charcoal. If you make a mistake like that and it's too fat, just do this. See, magic. Zhoosh it in and get rid of it. I'm just going to find another bit of charcoal that might have an edge or a point on it that I can use to make a finer line or a skinnier piece. Here's a skinny piece. Let's see if I can do these skinny little legs. That's better. So skinny legs like that, two little legs. Then we can put the reflection here. Just a soft little smudge. And then we've got this round sort of shape like that. Comes down like that. There's a dark tip on the end of it. That'll be the tail. Blend that in like that. Okay. Little dark tip, body. And then I'm going to make a point with my kneadable eraser and try to put a little bit of light just where the head is, just to sort of make that look like it's the head. Yeah. I'm not sure that does look like a bird, but anyway, we can imagine that it is. So that's the shape we want. Easier to see when you zoom in. Something like that. It looks weird, I know, but that'll do for now. Let's move on to the next guy. So there's a fair space between him and the next one, and this one's down a bit lower. So let's have a look at the shape of him. He has two legs. One's got a little bend in it, and there's another one back here, which looks a bit weird, but anyway. Things look weird when you do this, and then we try to draw what we think it should be when we don't draw what's actually there. So be aware of that and try to draw what you see, not what you think it should be. So we've got two little legs bending like that. They're quite far apart. Then we've got the foot on the sand and then the reflection under that, and then a little blob of a shape. And the shape starts wide and then it tapers off towards the left. That's the reflection. Okay. The reflection's quite dark up close to the feet, and then as it gets away, it sort of fades off a little bit into this darker area. So maybe he's a bit too high, but anyway. And you can dab that and soften it if you want to. And then we can look at the shape of the bird. So his little tail sits there, comes across like this. So this will be the tricky bit when we do it with pastels, because we'll need to use pencils or something small. Okay, and then up like that. And then he's quite light on the top. He's got a puffy chest and a little light head. Okay, and then as he gets down in towards the wing and the bottom of him gets darker. And if we made him too dark, we can lighten him off with the eraser. Okay. So that's my very bad looking seagull. His head's quite small, so probably made the neck a bit too wide at the back there. It's a bit better, a little bit better. Use the eraser to take out things. Okay, and then I'm just going to use the eraser again to lighten off the head a bit. Just dabbing it. So you can dab with it, you can rub with it, you can do all sorts of things. You can even blend pastels with it. So that's that little guy. The front of his face is a bit darker too. Just going to zoom in a bit and maybe give him an eye. There we go. That'll do. Okay, so and then his reflection is here. So often the reflections are a bit lighter than the actual thing. So I might lighten that off a little bit. There we go. That's better. Darken this part. I just didn't want the legs to look like they were a weird shape. Cool. Now let's do, oops, took too much off. Let's do the other fella, but we're going to bring him a bit closer. So let's bring him over to here. So he's a slightly similar sort of shape. Can't quite see the other leg as well. But anyway, we'll see how we go. So I might bring him about here. He's a little bit lower too. So start down lower, do his back, his little tail. Bring his shape around like this. He's got to be slightly bigger too if he's closer to us. So make sure he's either the same size or slightly bigger than the other guy we've just done. And put him in here. So he's darker on the chest. He's a bit lighter around the wing area and the head. Got a cute little beak there, an eye. I'm not very good at birds. And then we can do one leg is quite prominent. Sits across like that. The other one sort of is a bit softer in the background. And then his little reflection comes down here. But we've actually got this darker sand here, so we can bring the sand up a bit higher because his reflection is not in the wet sand. So that's interesting to note. Okay, and that'll do for our little birds. And if you want to get a bit of light back into him, we can touch him up with our eraser a bit more. That other guy's looking a bit weird, but anyway, his chest needs to be more puffy. It's full of fish and bread. There we go. So that is pretty much done for this part anyway. So this was a really good exercise just to practice the drawing and get familiar with the tones and the shapes and where everything sits. And now we can move on and get stuck into the colour version. How exciting. Keep your notes handy. You're going to need to refer to those. We can take off your paper or put it away, whatever you've got happening there at your place. And then we can tape down the pastel paper. You might want to prop that up nearby just so you can refer to it because it's a really good little reference to remember what we did as far as the tones and the drawing go. All right, so I'm just going to move this over this way because then you'll be able to see the colours that I've chosen to paint this with. So I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to tape down the corners. You can tape all the way around the edges if you want to on your paper. It's nice if you can because it keeps this white border nice and clean and you don't get pastel all over it. Then when you take it off, it looks nice and fresh. But be aware that the tape will possibly tear because this is just paper and it might tear it. So when you do stick tape onto it, put it onto your clothing first or something else like a towel or whatever you've got on the table just to get a bit of the adhesive off the tape first and then use it around the border. It won't be quite as sticky, but it'll keep it in place long enough. All right, so now I've got some colors here, and I chose them by looking at the image. Okay, now you may not have all exactly the same colors as me, but just see what you can find that's close. Okay, so I'll start with my lights. Now I've got a few blues because there's a lot of blue in this picture. I've got white, of course, and we'll save the white for last. So we're not going to use a lot of white. It'll probably be mostly in the reflections in the water. But I always save my white for last because I prefer to use other lights first. The next one I've got is a very, very, very light blue. It looks white. If it wasn't next to white, it would look white. But it's a beautiful light that we'll be using again in those lighter areas. Then I've got another blue, which is not quite as light, but still quite light. If that makes sense. They're all a bit grubby because they've been playing together in the sandbox. Pastels get so dirty when they hang around with each other. So that's another lighter blue, light blue, but not quite as light as this. So what we're trying to find is a range of blues from very light down to dark. Okay. I may need to go and get another one. Don't know. We'll see how we go. I picked this blue up. This is becoming, now we're working into our mid-tones. There's a lot of mid-tone in here. So this blue I can kind of see in the water, a little bit of it in the water there, maybe a little bit of it in the seagulls. It's quite a beautiful little blue. This blue is a similar tone, slightly lighter, I think. Let me squint and see. No, about the same. If you want to find the tone of your paint or colours, just squint, look through your eyelashes, or eyebrows if they're really long. Sorry, eyelashes. And everything kind of goes a grey, and then you can see the light to the dark. And these two look about the same tone, but they're a slightly different blue. This one's more of a sky blue. Then I've got this blue, which is probably the blue I'm meant to be using in here. So matching the tone again. So see how hovering that over the picture, I can see it's about the right tone. I may decide to go a bit darker or lighter. We'll see how we go. Then I've got this purple. I can see some of that in the sky. So there's a little bit of this tinge of pinky purple happening in the sky and in the reflections. So I thought that might be quite lovely to warm it up a bit. And then I've got this gorgeous apricot colour. So that looks lovely there. And I can see some of that in the sky, that pinky apricot tone just above the clouds there. Again, that's going to warm it all up and make it beautiful. It's also got a bit of orange in it, and orange and blue are complementary. So they work really beautifully together. And then I grabbed a really dark blue. So this is quite dark. It's that dark. And I like that because that's going to give me all the beautiful darks that I need, a little bit in the sky and in the water and in the foreground. Okay, so that's a dark blue. Lovely, lovely. I usually go for a blue violet as well, which is another dark. It's a dark with a purple tone to it. We'll see how we go. We may not need it, but if we do, we can always pick it up. So when you're picking out your palette, I like to choose my colours and try not to have too many to start with because it can get quite overwhelming when you have a lot of colours. So try to keep it down to a few like this. I've probably got, what have I got? 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 colours there, counting white. And that's probably enough to begin with. And then as we go, if we need to get more, I'm already seeing there's a bit of yellow in here. Maybe we're going to need a bit of goldy yellow, very light yellow through the sky there. Then we can go and grab it. So it's not like you can't use anything else, but it's a good place to start. So choose your colours. Put me on pause if you need to. I'll leave them here on the screen so you can see what they look like. And the next thing you'll need will be a little hand towel like this, and you need to wet one end. So I'm just going to go and do that, and then I'll be back. Okay, so what I did was I wet one end of my little towel. That means when I get my fingers really dirty, so for instance, if I pick up my dark blue to do something and put it back down, I've got dark blue all over my fingers. And then if I want to pick up a light color and I don't want to contaminate it with dark blue, I can give my hands a little wipe on the wet end of the towel and then dry them off on the dry end. And my fingers are reasonably clean enough to pick up light colors. So have a little towel handy because that's really a good thing to have. The other thing I've got handy is a white charcoal pencil. So I find that's quite useful for getting into the little bits like that'll be helpful when we go to do the seagulls. And you might have some pastel pencils that you can use as well. I also have some of those, but I didn't grab any. But we can do that if we need to. My doggy's coming to say hello. Hello. Off you go. You go. Go on your mat. On your mat. Get down. All right. On the mat. It's been raining for about 4 days, so she's bored out of her mind. Okay, let's get started. So first off, we are going to find our horizon line. And to do that, we need to rule up our page and put our grid line on. If you've got the Colourfix paper, you'll find your halfway mark at 15, sorry, it's 30 wide, so halfway is 15. You just want to put a light mark on there. You can use charcoal if you've got a light paper. So charcoal is fine to use with pastel. So you can actually grab charcoal like this. It'll blend in beautifully, so don't stress about it being too dark. And then your halfway mark on the other side's 23, so that's 11 and a half. So just find that and draw in your grid line. That's just going to help us find the horizon line and all the other bits and bobs that we need to know about. Okay, so we just want a nice soft grid line like that. And then we can start to figure out where things go. So we know our horizon line is just above the grid line. So let's put that in now. Make sure it's nice and straight. So straighten it with your ruler. Might make it a little bit taller, slightly about there. So that's our horizon line. We need to make sure we keep that line so we know where the sky stops and the water starts. All right. And we can just lightly with your charcoal or a pastel pencil, we can mark in that shape down in here. So this is a good time just to mark in our shapes so that we know where everything sits. Working out the height of the clouds that come across through here, where they go into here, just so that you don't come down too low with dark clouds and then haven't got enough space to put your light cloud in. You know, it's just mapping it out really. And so we're doing it really loose for this particular painting. If we had something with more detail, like a face or still life or something like that, we'd be getting a little bit more information on here. But because this is a very loose sky and it's got sort of soft shapes, we just want to loosely mark in where all the main darks and lights are. So remember, we've got that dark shape across the bottom here on the right. It's sort of a big triangular shape that comes across in that corner. And then our birds, we won't worry about putting them in just yet. You can kind of just mark where they might sit. Something like that. But we'll end up filling all that in and put the birds over the top anyway. So we won't be able to find those marks later. Okay, so that's about where everything's got to go. And we know our wave, that's our wave, sits on that halfway line pretty much right across, slightly above it on the right side. And then it comes down, tapers down a bit and kind of sits smack in the middle of that wave on the left. So you can darken that section off there just to remind yourself about where that sits. So I always find it really helpful to just mark things in like that so that you don't lose the lines. And then we've got the edge of the water. So you can see the edge of the waves are just in front of that. And then we have a bit of a gap of light water in between this triangle shape, which may need to come down slightly lower. But now we've got a bit of a map, a plan of where everything's got to go. So when I'm painting a landscape, I start at the top and I work my way down. Now, the reason for that is it's just easier to start at the top, especially with pastels. If you're working on an easel, the dust will drop down into a tray at the bottom of your easel, which is the ideal situation for pastels. And I usually do work standing at an easel, but because I'm teaching and making movies that you're watching, I do it flat on my desk because that's the easiest way to set up my camera so that you can actually see really clearly what I'm doing. So working flat is hard because you'll gather dust as you put pastel down on the paper. It'll sort of gather dust and the dust won't disappear or blend in easily sometimes, depending on the paper and the pastels, and you'll have to tip it off. So every now and again, I'm going to move my little colored tray off my board and tip my board up like that and just bang it onto my table. I've got a towel down there, so that means that all the dust will catch on the towel and I can take it outside later and give it a shake. But the reason I like the reason to work from top to bottom is as you're working, if you're on an easel, the dust will catch as it falls on the page and you'll end up with some of the sky color down here in the water area. Now, that's not going to be a problem for us because they're similar colors, but sometimes it gets very messy. So if you had already done the bottom section and then you worked up into the top section, all the dust from the top is going to land down here on the bottom. And if that's already done, how are you going to get it off? You've got to push it in, haven't you? So then you may as well be starting at the top and working down, because for me, that's the easiest option. So that's why I do it that way. So I've got my picture up on my other screen. I can see it really clearly, and that gives me a really good view of the lights and the darks. So let's start right at the top. Okay, now we've got light sky behind dark clouds, so we need to put in the light sky first, okay? So let's have a play, not with your lightest blue yet, we'll put that in a minute, but let's use this second lightest blue, and I'm going to just zhoosh that across here. What I want to do is get some pastel on the paper that I can start to push around as I add other colours. So I'm going to wipe that all the way across the top here. Okay, don't worry about where the lights and things are. We can look at that later. We're just doing it above that darker cloud. Okay, just wiping that on like that. And what I'm doing is I'm using a shorter piece of pastel. So if you've bought long sticks, you might want to break them into halves or thirds, because it's just easy to lie it flat like that on your paper and pull it across. It fills up a lot of area a lot faster than if you were doing this with the end of it, okay? So we're using our pastels like we use a brush, and this is the wide side of the brush. So that's that lovely wide side happening across the top there, okay? And then we can push it in with fingers. So remember I was talking before about the direction of things. So this sky is nice and wide, isn't it? So what I'm doing, I've got 3 fingers on the page and I'm just pulling it across in a horizontal direction. What the goal here is to get the pastel to stick to the paper, okay? And depending on your paper will depend on how much more or less you need to put down. But that's going to be enough to start working with now. So we're just working in this section above that darker cloud to begin with. All right, now we can play with some other blues. This is the blue I just used, so that's my 3rd lightest. I'm saving my lightest blue to put in some highlights. I'm just going to throw a bit more on. So I just want a bit more pigment to play with. What you need to do is get your pastel on the paper, and then when you add other pastels over them, they can then merge together and create really beautiful blends, or not, depending on how you use them. Now my lightest sky is about there. Let's see if this is going to be light enough. This is where you get to test your lightness and your darkness, okay? So I feel like I'm going to have to put a bit of white in there, but I'll still use this lightest blue just to mark in those areas that are really light up in the sky here. So there's a few little blotches of light on the left. You can hardly see what I'm doing because the colours are so similar. Now I've decided I do need my white. Where did it go? There it is. So I've got got my white here. I'm going to put that on in that lightest sky part. Now I know it's a bit hard to see, but once we get some darks around it, it'll start to make more sense. Why am I putting the light on first? Because it's in the sky and the clouds are sitting on top of it. So I've got to do the stuff that's at the back. That's the other way to work with pastels. You always work from back to front. Well, you don't always, but it makes life a lot easier. So I've put my white on here and here. You can see those very white patches of sky up through this cloudy bit here. Put some little white bits in there, and I've put a white bit over here on the right side where that lightest part is. Can you see all the dust that's gathering there? So what I'm going to do is tip it off onto my towel, give it a little bang. Now it's out of the way, so that's handy. All right, we've got our lights on. I'm just going to push it in a little bit because I want it to stick to the paper. By pushing it in, it makes it sort of hang on a bit better, and then I can put more over the top. So pastels work in layers, and as you build up the layers, it stops sticking to the paper. So by pushing it in, I'm kind of getting some tooth back. The tooth is the grittiness of the paper or the texture, so that I can put more over the top. Okay, let's pick up this blue. This is our fourth lightest blue. I should leave them there in order. Third lightest, sorry, not counting white. So pick up this one. And we're going to zhoosh a bit of that around now in the blue areas. So just zhooshing this around. Try to leave some of the whites unfilled. What I'm doing, I've got it on its side, right? But because I want to do more cloudy shapes, rather than turning it this way and pulling it across like that, I'm turning it this way and pulling it across. Because see the shapes of those clouds? We've got those distinct kind of lines that run across that way. That's what I'm trying to create, is that shape or direction of the clouds. So by pulling it across horizontally, and I'm not using the end of the pastel. If you use the end or the edge, you'll get a sharper line, and I don't want sharp lines in my clouds because they're soft. Okay, so that's why we need to pull it across in this direction. So I'm just trying to make those cloudy sort of shapes that are happening up in that top part of the sky. Okay, and we'll blend them in, so then they'll begin to kind of merge in and get softer. I'm just going to zhoosh a bit of it around here. See that top left section? Those clouds are more fluffy. They're not as stripy. So I'm going to do some fluffy shapes in there. And I've literally just put the pastel down on the paper and squiggled it. Just do squiggly marks with it like this. And see how that makes it look more cloudy and fluffy? Now, once you've got enough of that on there, and you don't need too much, we're just going to go gently and not smash too much on there. Then we can start to push it in. And when you do that, I want you to pull your fingers across in that horizontal direction like this. And what that will do is it'll push it into the pastel that's already on the page. So it'll blend the colors together and start to create a lovely soft sky. And if you press harder, you'll lose some of the definition and it'll go more blurred. If you press lighter, it'll keep some of those lines on there. See the lines that are there? Pushing across like that. And where I've got the white, I'm trying not to blend into that too much, but if we do, we can always put more on. Pastels are very forgiving. You can see all my dust gathering there. Okay, and then up in this section where it's more fluffy clouds, I'm going to do fluffy movements, just like I did with the pastel stick. So using your finger, just do these little squiggly sort of movements like this and kind of push it into the paper. We're trying to get the paper to hang on to it so we can put more over it. See how beautiful and soft and fluffy that went? So fun. All right, now I've got dust, so I've got to tip it off. I'm wiping my fingers off on my towel as I go here. So whether I need the dry or the wet end doesn't really matter. It's just good to give them a bit of a wipe. So see how soft and beautiful that looks? It's really soft and dreamy, but we need to get more dark in there. So pick up your next darkest one. That's this guy. And I'm going to put a bit more dark in there. We're going to start to create some tone. We've still got that darkest blue to go. So we'll save that for the really dark bits. But this is where I want to put some darks to make the contrasts up through this area here. See, again, just squiggly sort of marks, but sort of horizontal, but squiggly, just to get some tone happening. Don't be afraid of the dark. And then we're going to come down in here and I'm going to just put a few streaks through there. And coming across this way. So that's our cloudy sort of spot up the top left. Moving across here, you can see there's some darker shapes in the sky. There's one that comes down like that. Just draw them on, and I'm using the end of the stick now, not the sharp end, because I don't want hard lines, but what I've got is the stick that like that, and if you lie it flat and then pick it up and just tilt it so one end is touching the paper, and that way you'll get a soft, wide mark. Okay, so it's a softer mark without getting too heavy. And we're just doing all the bits above the dark part, the darkest part. We'll come and darken that off in a sec. And up in the top left there, we've got a bit of dark wispy cloud, sorry, top right. And then up through here, there's a bit of cloud coming across like this. Some wispy bits through there. Just looking at the shape, the way the wind is blowing the clouds, make sure you're drawing them in that shape. Okay. All right. Now, once you've got enough of that mid blue on there, then you can get your finger and do a similar thing. So we're kind of going to pull it in with your finger. Imagine it's a brush and you're pushing paint around. We're just going to blur that off a little bit, softly, softly. Press lightly at first, and then if you haven't gone hard enough, you can go harder, but don't go in too hard to start. It's all that's the key with pastel, is start light. Always start light and soft, and then as you need to, you can get harder. Whether it's applying a pressure with your pastel or your fingers, doesn't matter, but you give yourself that option. Makes life a lot easier. Just over here on the left, I'm pushing it in. I'm still pulling my fingers left to right, horizontally, to soften off those lines. See how that's now starting to look lovely and cloudy. I'm trying to keep those white bits white, but if that doesn't work, we can always put more on. And then up here on the left section, top left, just zhooshing this around a little bit to create cloudy, soft effects over those lighter blues that we made before. Looking nice, that's nice. No hard lines in clouds unless it's a really strong edge, but usually they're soft. Beautiful. Now I'm going to tip off my dust again. Okay. Now we can work down into this darker area. So I'm going to bring this down through here. I've got, this is the blue we just used, so it's the mid blue. And I'm just going to bring it down. I'm pressing harder. See, when you press harder, you get a much stronger coverage. I'm just bringing that down through there. Don't go all the way to the horizon line because we've still got some light, beautiful pinky skies to put in around there. Okay, so just darkening off through there with this darker blue. Beautiful. And I'm going to push that in now. You know, you can pause the video. If I'm going too quickly, you can always pause and catch up. But don't feel like you've got to keep up with me. Give it a little pause. Okay, pushing this in like that. And that's now created that big, wide, darker cloud across the sky. Tipping off dust again. This is why it's good to be on an easel, because you don't have to worry about the dust and tipping it off. It just falls down. Now, I want to go a bit darker here. Should I put this really dark blue in here? Sure, why not? Let's see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit of it up here and just go gently. We don't want to put too much on. So don't want it to get too dark, but we do want a bit more contrast up in there. And then I'm going to put a little bit of it through here in just a couple of spots, not all over, but just noticing where it's darkest. Just wiping a little bit across like that. Okay, and maybe a zhoosh, a tiny zhoosh of it up there. This is just going to, again, help to create the contrast that we've got going on between light and dark. Remember I said if you want your lights to be light, you've got to have darks. Okay, so I've zhooshed a bit of my dark around on there like that. It's just sitting on the surface. And now I'm going to get my fingers and start to push it in a little bit. So up here on that top left area, I want this section up here to be fairly dark because I want the light behind it to pop. Okay, so I'm just going to push that in softly, hardly touching it, just doing soft little squiggly marks with my fingers. Right, and then you can always grab the other blue that we used and put a bit more of that on if you need to put more on. Actually, I want to try this blue that I haven't picked up yet because it's got a bit of a warmer tone to it. That's nice. Just for something a little bit different. So I'm going to zhoosh a bit of that through as well. That's nice. It's a nice kind of a little bit more warmth in there. So this is what you do. You put it all down and then you think, well, maybe I need to add something, create a little bit of warmth or depth or whatever. So that's nice. It's giving me that lovely darker tones in the clouds. I'm going to throw a bit more of this dark in. Don't be afraid of the dark. Up in here, just to create that lovely contrast. Zhoosh it up in here on the top right corner, a little bit of dark through there, so I'm just softly pushing that in as well. And then down here through the big bank of dark clouds, I'm just going to pull it across, and when I'm doing this, I keep my finger flat on the page, not lifting it off, and I'm just pulling it across like this, back and forth, pushing in some of that dark to create a bit more contrast in this bank of clouds here. Now, the reason I'm doing that is because I want the light sky that we put in below it to really be beautiful and bright. But we need more dark to make it dark, not light. Falling off my words again. I'm just going to zhoosh a bit of this over softly, like that. And then I'm going to come back over it with my other blue. So you don't always have to blend. And a lot of pastel artists will tell you not to blend. That's up to you. You get to choose. I like to blend and I like to not blend. It just depends on what I'm doing and where I'm up to in the picture. You usually blend at the first to get everything pushed in, and then as you work up to the final layers, you stop blending. So I've just put some blue over that dark blue, right? They're kind of mixed together a bit, and I'll zhoosh it with my fingers a bit more because I want to soften it off. And just push it around like that. If you've got hard lines, you want to soften them, just press a bit harder. Try not to make too much mud. Mud is when you get it all dirty and all the colours mixed together and you don't want them to. Sometimes we do want them to. If you want to make beautiful greys, then mixing those colours together is glorious. But It just depends. We want to keep our sky fairly fresh and light, or bright at least. Okay, so that's that top section. I'm just going to tip off some dust again. It's a bit annoying, isn't it, all this dust? Okay, quite like what's going on in there. I'm going to throw a bit more white. I'm just going to touch my white back on here now. I just want to lighten up those couple of light spots. I'm pressing hard with my little stick of white. It's just a short bit, lying it flat and pushing that in where I can see those white bits, just to get those shiny bits back in there. Up in that top left section, I need some more white up in there because there's highlights on those clouds. And we've got this beautiful white part over here on the right. So just literally touching the white on. I'm going to try really hard not to blend this, because if you blend it, it won't stay white. It'll go blue. So I want to let the white sit on the surface. I might push this in a bit so it looks a bit more natural on the left. But those big areas, I'm going to leave them so that they shine. Tipping off. Lovely. All right, now we can move down and get some of these yummy pinks and things in here. So let's start with our lightest blue. Do I want light blue? No, I've decided I want to put white here, and then I can put the pinky over the top of it. Okay, so let's do that. Let's put the white down through here so it goes below that darker cloud. I'm going to fill in all of this area above the horizon with my white. Now, normally I don't put white anywhere until the very end or for the highlights, but this is going to be under everything. And to make all those beautiful lights shine, I want the white there. If I put blue there and then put pink over the top, it would go purple. And so to keep the colour crisp and clean, the white's going to help me keep it nice and light. I've got the pinky colour now. This is that apricot colour that we picked up. I'm just zhooshing a bit of that across here. And I said earlier that we might have to pick up some yellow, and I feel like I'm going to need some yellow. But first I just want to get a bit of this pink on. So what I'm doing is applying colour into this area, and then I'll push it in. When I've got enough colour on there that I feel like I'm ready to push it in, I'll do that. So I just want to get this sky looking lovely and light. I'm just going to go grab a little very pale lemon. Now I've got two yellows there, so you can see this one's really light and this one's also light but not quite as light as that one. If I put this over the top, just softly pushing it on, see how that makes it just glow? That's what we want. We want that beautiful glow. And there's a lovely bit of yellow over here on that far left section. Might put this yellow on there as well, just to make it a bit more yellow. Okay, that's looking nice. Now have a look at your picture, figure out where is this coral pinky colour. There's a lot of it right down here on the horizon. We talked about that before, remember? We want to make sure we get that beautiful light colour right on the edge there between the sky and the water. And it's sort of softer on the other side because we've got those little mountains or clouds in front of it. So let's just zhoosh some of this around. Okay, so once we've got those colours on there now, we can start to push those in. And again, we want to run in a horizontal direction because the clouds and the sky are sort of doing that. So I'm just going to start to push this in. I'm going to press pretty hard because I want to pick up some of the white underneath it. So that's going to help to keep it all very light. And then we'll come back over it with some of the blue to create those darker clouds. Let's just push this sky in first. And if you feel like you don't have enough pastel on the paper, sometimes we don't put enough down. You can still see the colour of the paper through it. And again, that's a really lovely thing if you want to use your paper as part of your painting, absolutely. That's why it's such a good thing to have all these different coloured papers. But if you want to fill it in, if you might be working on a black or green or something that doesn't really work with this picture, then you might want to stick more pastel down onto your paper. So that's a beautiful light sky, or gorgeous. Okay. Now up where it meets this dark blue cloud, just kind of merge those together a little bit. Sort of run your finger across the edge where they join and merge those together so you've got a nice soft edge where they join up. If you feel like you need to add more pastel to get more light in here, because we've got to get this light in now, because we're going to come over the top of it with darker clouds. So focus on the light now so that we make sure that we get all of that down first, because it's harder to put it in after. Give those beautiful pinks. You might want more pink in your sky. You can choose. Do what you like. Okay, so that's a bit more yellow and a bit more pink. And I'm going to press a little bit lighter now because I want that to sort of shine and glow a little bit more. So when you push colour into the paper, it gets a bit muddy and loses its glow. If you want the glow of pastels to really shine out of the paper, you need to leave some of it sitting on the top and not push it in too much. That way, it'll really shine. I'm just going to wipe a bit more of this on. Beautiful, very light yellow, beautiful. Okay, I'm going to tip off my dust. All right, now that's starting to come together nicely. What I'm going to do now is pick up this mid blue. This is the mid blue that we have already used up in the sky. And I'm just going to start to draw in some edges around here. So you can see around this section here, there's some bluish clouds coming down through here on top of the sky. Okay, so we just want to draw some of those in. Just put a little bit on and just using the end of the stick, but not the sharp edge. So sort of tilt it so that you get a soft edge. And we're drawing in some of these clouds, and most of it is on the left, isn't it? So soft little movements like that. Okay. Then we're going to push it in with fingers very softly and pull it, and try not to make that light sky too dirty. All right, I'll show you how. Get a nice clean finger, cleanish, and I want you to just pull it like this. Softly, softly. Trying to keep some of that light in behind. So we've got our little blue clouds in there. There's a couple of darker ones as well, but let's go over to the other side and have a look at these ones on the right. So we've got some that come in just on the side there, like that. Sort of long, wispy ones. And then on the horizon, we've got those soft little clouds that we talked about before. So I'm just going to do these zhoosh little soft movements like that. And then we can push them in with fingers, softly, softly. Just want to go really softly. Try to make them all kind of different shapes and not evenly spaced like I just did. Oh dear. Anyway, softly, softly, just a little bit of blue on like that, okay? And then we're going to push it in softly again. So just here on these ones on the horizon, just do little fluffy movements, push them in softly. Just use the pad of one finger, little fluffy edges, and pushing them in. So I want to try and keep them quite soft and organic looking. Okay, so that's nice. I'll just put a bit of zhoosh on that so everything's kind of leaning to the right because of the way I'm sitting. It really does matter the way you sit or the way you stand or how you hold your arm. It makes a huge difference to the way that you move everything, and then everything begins to look a bit similar. That's why standing in the easel is a really good option. Now I'm just going to pull these across like that. Just pull across once and then lift. So over here, I'll do the same. I'm going to start here and I'm going to go across and lift, across and lift. Trying to get that beautiful wispy sort of effect going on without blending them in too much. And the same over here. So clean your finger off and then go across and lift. So we're getting that beautiful wispy cloud that's hovering around in that area. Now, I know there's a bit more in that sky. You can come back in and put a bit more cloud through there if you want to. Let's see, where's my dark one gone? There it is. Pop a little bit of dark. This is that darkest blue through there. And a little bit more through here. But I want to save that for my horizon line. It made mud. See how that made mud? Pushing that blue into my yellow, now I've made a mess. So I've got to come back now and try and clean it up a little bit. So this is the tricky bit. When you make a mess and you've blended it too much or something, then you want to come back in and clean it. But every time I put my pastel down over that blue, it picks up the blue, doesn't it? So you need to wipe your pastel clean. Paper towel's good for that. And put some more on. So I might just leave that alone because I'm quite happy with how that's looking now. And throw a bit more pink in here, I think, because I just want to pink that up a bit more. If you want to lighten something, you can throw a bit of white over the top and then push it in. But we need to get these lovely lights in so that when we put our darks in below it in the water, they're going to really shine. So you've got to kind of think ahead, how is this going to affect that when I do this, or etc., etc. All right, I think the sky is pretty much done. I don't want to fiddle around in there too much because sometimes if you fiddle too much, you can ruin it. So we'll leave it alone and we'll move down to the horizon line. So I'm going to pick up my darkest blue and I'm going to draw that line in across there. So I like to just go softly, softly like this. We drew it in before, so we kind of know where it is. If you have to come up and overlap some of the sky to close the edge between the two, then do that. But just draw a nice dark line across there like that. That's our horizon. It looks loose. This is how pastels are. They're always loose and they're dusty and they're messy. It's hard to get a sharp line. Now we've drawn that on, but you can see that the water is actually lighter as it comes forward from that horizon. So if we now put some of this blue, this is that beautiful warm blue, I'm going to put a bit of that down in here. I'm just looking at the colour of the water now. Put some of that down through here. And then I'll pull them across and kind of blend them together a bit. I just want to get that on first. Okay, so again, going horizontal. You can see behind that wave, there's a bit of light. So I'm going to add a bit of light down here now. So this is my light blue, light, not the lightest, the second lightest one. Looks almost white, doesn't it, against all the other colours. There's a light area sort of between the water and the top of those really dark waves. And we want to make the waves nice and dark, so we've got to have light behind them. Okay, so if you've got your darkest blue down, then your mid blue, and then a light blue, sort of like a stripe. And next thing, we're going to run our fingers across and we're going to kind of merge it all together, but keep your finger running straight. So we're going to try and keep that dark horizon line as straight as we can, all right? So what you want to do is make sure that you get the pad of your finger. Don't let it go up into the sky. Keep it kind of down here. And see how I'm just softly pulling that across. I'm getting dust on the edge where the clouds are, but I'll tip that off. I don't want to blend it in because if I do that, it's just going to mess up all my clouds. See See how that's running across nice and smooth. Nice and smooth. So I'm just doing little back and forth movements, left to right, pulling that across, getting it all smooth and pushed into the paper. Pressing pretty hard because I want to make sure that that gets pushed right in. Okay, now let's study this water. Behind the left-hand section up here, we need a bit more dark. I'm just going to put a tiny bit of dark through here. Just a light sweep of dark across there. I might put a little bit of it just there too. There's actually wave and foam happening over here on the right. But anyway, I'm going to pull that through and pull this one through. We want to create some contrast. Okay, so that's the water behind the waves. Now we've got to tip off this dust. When I tip this dust off, because it's dark dust, I don't want it to go up into my light sky. So I'm going to come forward now. I'm going to tip it this way, tip it downwards so that it falls down into the bottom part of my page. You can see some of the pastel gets caught on the paper. That's okay. We're going to push all that in later anyway. And then I'm just going to run my fingers across here again to try and create a really smooth, straightest as possible line. Now, if you've got a dark blue pencil or something, you can always use that to give yourself a really sharp line across there. I'm just sort of winging it, hoping it'll go smooth. It's really not straight enough, and this is where a pencil would be quite helpful. Let me grab one, and we'll see what we can do. I don't use pastel pencils very much because they tend not to stick very well over pastel. So if you've already got pastel down, sometimes they don't sort of stick over the top. They work beautifully on their own for things like pet portraits and hair. So I'm just putting a ruler there. Is that straight? I always do my horizons crooked. And then I'm going to pull it down a tad. No. All right, so this is my pencil. It's a darkish blue pencil. It's the darkest blue one I could find. Just going to draw that line across there like that. Okay. Now I know that I need to bring this up. So just use the pencil to do that. So we've got this consistency of the colour. It's a nice sort of dark sea greeny blue colour. Just to close the gap between what I put down earlier and the top of that. There we go, that's better. Taking off my dust, because pencils make dust too. And then I might just touch up as close as I can to the edge with the dark again. And I'm going to pull that across gently with my finger. Okay, so gone off the screen. Pulling that across like that without smudging that nice sharp line. It's all about where you put your fingers. Try and be a bit careful. There we go. That's lovely. Now look how light that sky looks against the beautiful dark horizon. I've lost some of my clouds, so I might come back in now and zhoosh a few more clouds in there. Softly, softly. Okay, and then I can just softly push them in gently, gently. So they're a bit softer. Lovely. All right, we've got that background water in. We've got our horizon line in. This is looking good. I've got to tip off the dust. Try not to blow it. If you do, it ends up all over you and your house and everything else. Okay, just clean up that edge a bit. Right, not going to touch that edge again. I might. No, I'll try not to. All right, let's come forward. Now we've got to put these beautiful waves in, and you can see that they're not just one straight wave all the way across. We have a lovely dark wave here. So using your darkest pastel, sort of comes across like that and about here, and then it tapers down. So just draw one line down like that, and then it widens just past the halfway line up to here, darker through there, all the way across. So that's our dark wave line. Okay, so let's pull that across like this with our fingers. Doesn't matter if we pull some colour down into the foreground in front of the waves, because we're going to fill all that up anyway. Try to keep that, the top of them, kind of clean if you can, because we've got that lovely light blue behind them at the back there. So we want to create something like that. They're not straight, so this is good. If they're not straight, doesn't really matter if we go crooked. Awesome. Happy when things are crooked. Okay. But that's the beautiful darkness of those waves. That's the drama again. Gorgeous. Now, as I said earlier, there's a bit of foam over here on that right side. I don't know if you want to be putting that in or not. Let's see how we go. So I'm using my mid blue. I'm just going to put a bit of a fluffy kind of shape here. Okay, because it's early in the morning, everything's very blue. So just zhooshing that around a bit, make it foamy, fluffy, like a cloud. That looks all right. Maybe I'll pop a bit of this other blue in there as well, just to create some tone and light, because the sky colour will be reflected in the water. There we go. That looks like a nice foamy wave. Okay, tipping off dust. Gorgeous. Now we've got our dark wave in there, and we can now move forward. So let's come forward. We've got 2 stripes of dark and 2 stripes of mid. So if we come across with our mid-tone like this is my mid blue. It's the blue that we have in most everything that we sort of use in the middle tone. If we put it all the way down, bring it down about that far, and then push it in, pull it across like this. Lovely. And then grab your, let's see if the pencil will work. I don't know if it's going to be, oh yeah, that'll work. Okay, so I'm just going to use the pencil. So if you have a dark blue pencil or something similar, we're going to just touch up the bottom of the waves again. So this is nice. It'll kind of match that line, the line I put on the horizon. Make these a bit darker. And then we can use the pencil to put a dark stripe. And we've got 2 dark stripes here, so that's indicating waves in the water as it comes towards us. So we'll see if this is going to be dark enough. I'm not sure, but we do need a bit of light on top of this one. So can you see how the water is a little bit lighter? It sort of gets light in front of the wave, and then it goes down into the dark stripe. So that's where there's a new wave forming, and it's got the shadow underneath it running across here. I had to go over it with my dark blue because it wasn't quite dark enough. Like that. And then we can pull our fingers across and just sort of push that in like that. So what we want is this lighter blue. That's this blue. It's still a mid, but it's a bit lighter than the other one, or brighter. sitting on there in front of the wave, the big waves, to create, because it's reflecting the sky, right? It's reflecting the light from the sky. And then we've got the dark crease where there's a new set of little wave coming. And then we've got more light in front of that again. So there's light down here. You're just looking at everything as shapes, stripes, triangles, all the things. Wiping some of that on across here like that. Okay. Darken up that stripe if you've lost some of the dark that I've done. Because when you put light in front of it and push it around, you tend to lose the definition of the line. So you might want to darken that up a little bit more again. Okay. We're coming forward now with little waves. And there's a really light spot. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a lighter spot. So this is where the water is catching the sky. Just trying this blue, but it's not light enough. I'll go to my next one. It's this one. A little bit of light through there. You see that? Just between that first small wave and the next one that we're going to put in. So the water is reflecting the light. You've got to always think about reflection and light because it's really important. It's what brings things to life. So I'm just going to put a bit of light down through here where the water will be catching the light from the sky. It just makes it look more authentic. Okay. And then we have another dark stripe and it comes across like this. So just keeping it loose and then putting that in, pulling that across, smoothing it off a little bit. So that's our water. And there's a light line across the top of that one just there. You can kind of see the top of the little wave that's catching the light. In fact, there's a light nearly all the way across, but just do broken lines of light, not one continuous line because that looks unnatural. Groovy. Just going to lower this bit of sand here. Make it about there. Okay, so now we've got our water in. I'm just going to tip off my dust again. And in front of the water, we've got a lovely combination of colours. So over on the right, we've got some of that pink out of the sky because this is now reflecting the sky, isn't it? So let's put some of the pink in and it comes down to about there. So let's put the pink in here. It's that beautiful apricot colour and there's a lovely glow of it just over on that left side as well. We've got the pink across through there. Then I'll put some white in. Why am I doing that? Because if I put yellow down and then blue on it, it's going to go green. So I need what's called a bridging colour. And this will be my bridge from the yellow to the blue because I don't want green. So if I put my white down here and a bit of a line of it through there, and another one across here, then I can pop yellow over these where the white and the pink meet. And I won't make green because there's no blue in that part. And the white has become my bridge between the yellow and the blue. Does that make sense? I hope so. So now I've got that on there. I want to get a bit of blue. You can see there's some really lovely blue here in the front. Just in this section here. There's some light as well, which I can also pop in. Just going to put a bit of that blue through here. Down into my pinky colour because that'll go sort of purple, which is nice. It's almost a purple tinge on top of that triangular sandbank on the left there. Put a bit of pink over the top of that, and it'll go like a grey sort of purple colour. Lovely. So there are our base colours for that section, and I'm going to push it all in now, and then we'll fiddle around with it a little bit more. So I've got a clean finger. I'm going to start on this end. I'm going to push all this pink and yellow and white together first, because I don't want to push blue into it yet. Just got to make sure I get that all blended in first. Okay, and then a little bit of the pink over this side. I'll push that in too. Now I can come up and I can close the gap here. I can, between the front of the water and this section here, it goes from the blue to the pink. So I'm just going to merge those two together by blending across like this. I don't want to get it down near the yellow because that'll make green. Okay, lovely. And same over here. And there's a bit more blue over here in the foreground. So just merge that through. Beautiful. Lovely, lovely. Now, let's put some light in front of the wave here. So I've just picked up my light blue. It's not my lightest blue, but it's the light one that looks white. I'm going to get a bit of white through here, or light, I should say. Just around this area, right in the front. Again, we're reflecting the light from the sky. It's nice. I'm just going to, again, just gently rub my finger over the top, pull it all the way across, like that, and that'll merge it all in nicely. And then if you want to brighten anything up, so over here on that left side where that beautiful shiny pink is, I want to put more pink there, and then I'm going to put this lovely yellow over the top. See how that glows? But I'm not going to blend it in because I don't want it to get too dirty. Okay, tipping off dust. All right, so this is coming along nicely. You can see a fingerprint there. Careful not to leave fingerprints. It's hard. Now let's move down into this blue section down through here. Grab your mid blue, and we're just going to fill up all this bit through here like this. We'll come back and do the sandbank in a minute. Just come down through here like this. Box there. We can put more light, we'll put light back in when we get something on the paper. We've got to get something down first so we've got something to work with. I'm just going to merge a little bit of that over into this section here. All right, so that's some blue on there. Now we need to push that in. And when you push it in, bring it sideways because that's the way the water or the wind is moving. Okay, so we're just pushing it in left to right. I'm just using one finger. You can use more if you like. I just want to get that pushed in, and then we can get some colour on top and start creating the lights and darks. Lovely. Make sure you overlap the edge where the sandbank's going to go because it'll sit on top of the water. So we've got to get the edge right up close. Don't want to have a gap between the two edges. We'll send this blue up here into that bit. There we go. That's looking nice. Now where you might not have put enough down, it might not be covering. So see how I've got some gaps there? I'm just going to put a bit more on so I can get it to stick to the paper. Just got to make sure you get enough pastel on there. You can push it in and make it stick. There we go. That's better. Lovely. So I've got this beautiful blue area now. Now let's put this sandbank in. Get that out of the way. So it's quite dark. So pick up your darkest blue. And we're going to put that in here. Okay, so it's on a triangle shape. I'm going to put a bit of the other blue over the top of it because I don't want it to be too strong. Put a bit of blue over the top and then push that in. Try to keep the area above it that we've put that lovely highlight on nice and clean. If you don't, we can get back in and put it in again. There we go. So that's in there now. Good, good. And then you might want to clean up the edge a little bit because I've gone outside the edges. I'm just going to clean that up with the mid blue that we've put down just a minute ago. It's actually got a slight tinge of a lighter blue around the edges like there. Can you see that in the picture? It's a little bit lighter just through there. So I'm just going to lighten that up a tad with this light blue, using the end of it. So you want a sharp line this time. So use the edge of the top or whichever part has your sharp edge. And then very softly just sort of push that in a little bit with one finger. Don't press too hard or you'll lose that brightness and tip off dust. Okay, now what are we going to do next? We've got to look at the reflections in here. So grab your lightest blue, I think, not your very lightest, but the next one down. I'm just going to do some of those little zhushy marks through here. See that? Little zigzaggy marks to create these reflections. Just using the edge or the tip of your pastel to make it where you would use to draw a line and marking those on like that. So we're just going to mark in our soft little edges. Try not to make them all the same kind of size. Now, by putting down this blue, we can come back over it with lighter colours if we need to get lighter. Or we can put a bit of darker tone around it. I'm just marking in some of the spots where there's reflection. And then we'll push it in. So it might look a bit bright and weird at the moment, but it'll be fine. Okay, so they're our lighter spots really, aren't they? Where there's a little bit of light happening. Softly, softly. Now I want to just pick up this other blue. So this is my other mid blue. It's that warmer one. I'll put a little bit of that around as well. Ooh, it had a big blob of dark on it. I'm going to zhuzh a bit of that around because there's a couple of different tones of blue in here. We've got to sort of mix them together to create a nice combination. Otherwise, it'll just look flat. So we've got to get those tones working. So that's that warmer mid blue. Now I know the light blue that we put down isn't light enough, but we can brighten that up easily. Let's just push some of this in first. I'm just going to, before I do, I want to grab my darkest blue, so be brave here, and just zhuzh a bit of this through here, just very lightly, not much. We just want to put a little bit of that through there to get some movement in the water. Okay, just around through here. So just a few little dabs of that, and then we'll push it in, so it won't be quite as strong, but it'll just help to create some tone and movement. All right, finger. And remember, everything goes horizontal, so just running this across like this. And put more over the top, so if it looks a bit muddy or dirty, don't worry. Pulling your finger across like this in this shape. that direction, horizontal direction, to create the movement in the water. That's nice. With a bit of movement. Great, that's one layer. A little bit more. Bring off your dust. Okay, so now we've got some movement happening. Now we can start to have a bit of a play with some more colours. I'm just going to come back over with this mid blue. That's the warm one again. I want to put a bit more of that down. So what we're doing is we're building up some layers, and we're just creating the beautiful tones that we can see in this water. Okay, and now I'm going to come back over with my light again and put some lights in here. So again, those little zigzaggy sort of shapes through there. See how it's starting to come together? It's all about layers. You've got to keep layering and layering. You don't put pastel down once usually and then leave it. It's usually a lot more layering than that. Okay, so that's our beautiful reflections. Got some over here as well. I'm using the pastel on its side over here because it's a bit wider and not quite as defined in the shape of it. There's a bit of it back here too. Got some light back in there. Just running across like this, getting that lovely reflection going on. Can you see there's a bit of pink on the edge here, just before it goes into that dark section on the corner, and that's reflecting the sky. So let's pop a bit of pink in here because that's a bit nice. Put a bit of it up in here too. So everything's reflecting, remember, everything. So we keep using the same colours in each area because it's all reflections. I'll put a bit of it over here. All right, now we can push this in again. So as we push, we're going a bit lighter. We're not pressing quite as hard now because we want to keep some of the vibrancy of the colour on the surface. So press less hard. The less hard you press, the brighter the colour's going to be. Okay. Now, we'll have to add more light to these reflections over here, and that's fine, we can. You can get quite a lot of pastel onto one piece of paper, as long as it's proper pastel paper. If it's rubbish paper, it won't stick. So you've got to make sure you get the good stuff. Okay, I'm just going to soften that there on that edge. Tipping off again. Okay, we're getting there. Now we need to brighten up these reflections. Pick up your, this is not white, my white, it's my very light blue. Okay, it's a light blue. Where's white? I'll show you the difference. You can see that? It's not much different, but this has got a blue tinge to it. Okay, I'm going to use my lightest blue to get this reflection in here, and I'm pressing a little bit harder now because I want it to be stronger. Come down through there like that. Okay, and then there's another one next to it. The same thing. I'm just going to do some little broken lines. And we've got these two guys over here on this side. Broken lines for reflections. And a bit over here. This water's all got movement in it. It might be windy. It's causing some marks and lines and different little shapes. Okay, and then in here, I'm just going to lighten that up a little bit too. I'm thinking about the birds now. If I want the reflections of the birds to stand out, we've got to have a little bit of light to put under them. Okay, so now I'm pressing very lightly, hardly touching. I'm just pushing that in lightly on the surface. Again, making sure I'm pulling it in the right direction. Don't go up and down or round and round, because that's not how these things are shaped. Coolio. All right, that's good. Now tipping off dust. Let's have a crack at a bird. Now, you can use pencils if you want to. I've got a white and a blue. I'm going to actually use a skinny bit of charcoal. Now, sometimes charcoal works really well with pastel. Sometimes it doesn't stick. It just depends on how much you've got, how much pastel's on the paper. But anyway, let's have a crack at the charcoal because it's quite soft. We can get a very nice touch with it. So I'm just going to put the shadow of this one down here. Yeah, I've just got a skinny bit of charcoal. It's only a little tiny skinny bit. And the thing is, we can mark it in with charcoal, and then if you need to go darker with pastel, you can. Those two legs, remember those two skinny legs? I'll probably touch this up with a bit of pastel, but at least we can get the drawing in. And the shape of the back of this one, it comes up in a point and then comes around and down. So a point and around and down, like that. So that's a good shape for a seagull. Okay. And then I'm going to leave that one there for now. And I'll come back to it with some pastel and touch it up. Okay, but it's a good idea to use the charcoal just to get the shapes in the right spot because it's quite easy to get off. It's easier than pastel to get off if we need to. Let's go over here now and make this guy be here. So I'm going to draw his back and tail. So I'm just going to draw the shape of the bird first. Back goes up like that, and then we've got the head there. And then we're going to come down in a round shape like that. And his tummy or belly. And then the head and the beak. And put that in later with the pastel or the pencil. And then remember, we've got to put his little leg in here. It's got a little bend in the leg. And then a foot. And then the other leg's sort of over there, like he's walking or something. And there's a reflection of that in the sand. And then that's goes that way and that way. This leg goes that way and that way. And then we've got reflection of the body here. And this reflection kind of fades off. So it starts fairly strong in this bit, and then as it goes up, it gets softer and wanders off. So that's that little guy. And then we can put this one next to him. So same thing, we just put him a little bit closer. Tail, his tail's there. Back goes up straight, and then he's got his head there. This is just very soft, vague kind of marks, just to get everything in the right spot. And under, and that's him. And then he's got a tail there like that. His head, beak. And then we can only really see one of his legs. And he's on the edge, isn't he? So we don't have much of a reflection for him. If you want to make one, you can. His reflection would be in the dry sand down here, which means this guy will end up in there too. Okay. Just draw an edge about where that might be. Oops. Maybe he can have a reflection too. We'll give him one. There we go. So that's about where my birds are going to go, I think. Okay, that looks all right. So let's see how we go with putting them in with pastel. So mark them in with charcoal first. Let's have a crack at it. I'm going to try pencil first and see if it'll stick. So we've got the dark tail of this one and then coming around And his little head is at the front, but we can't really see it. It's just like a light circle. Marking that in. Reflection. Now I'm going to be brave and see if I can make this work with pastel. So the body is lighter than the back end. This is where you've got to get nice and close and just use the edges of your sticks to try and get the sharp bits in. There's a fair bit of dust gathering around him, but anyway, so just doing that like that. And then if I use my white pencil, I can get a little round top of his head. It's too white, but I can dull it down in a minute. But just to mark in where the head is. And what else is white on him? He's a little bit lighter on the top, the back. And just behind him in the water, it's got to lighten off that area around the shadow. Just going to tip off the dust of that one. It's getting in the way. So his head's too light, but we lighten that down. I'll come back with my pencil. Just lighten it down a little bit. A wonky looking bird. The other awesome thing to use, anyway, I won't. I'll see if I can do it with pastel. I'll use this dark blue to get the legs in. Just go gently, gently, carefully, carefully. And the reflection. As you can see, it's a bit tricky to get those fine, fine lines, especially for the little skinny legs. With my eraser, yeah. See if you can get the eraser to kind of just lift some off if you need to, so you can make a sharp edge and you can lift it off by just touching it on, because what the pastel and the charcoal is just loose pigment. So if you make a little edge with your eraser and it's not been blended in yet, we should be able to pick some up off the page. That's looking a bit better. Fiddly, very fiddly doing these tiny parts. Just touching up the head a bit and the body, because it's not dark, the body gets lighter as it gets forward, and then the little head's just slightly lighter on the top. So I don't want to make it too defined, and then making the shadow a bit darker there, and then I'm pulling it down. So the shadow goes down like that and across, does a bit of both. You've got to kind of pull it towards you and then across a bit. Just go lightly. That'll do for that guy. All right, let's see what we can do with these other two. So these two are darker on the wing and the tail. So let's use our dark pastel or a dark pencil if you've got one. And just darken off that wing and tail area like that. And then I'm going to use my blue, which blue, this one, to put his little head and body on, because even though they're white, they look blue in this light. And we don't want them to be too white because then they'll be bright, and they're not that bright in the picture. So you can do tiny bits. You've just got to be really careful and get the edge, very edge of the pastel to do the work. So it's good to have a sharp edge if you can find one. Right, these ones are pretty good. It's been broken, so I've got a nice sharp edge there that I can draw with. Still tricky though, getting into those little areas. While I've got this in my hand, I'll come over and do the other guy. So I'm going to do his head. And neck and chest. Okay. And then put his little wing on. So he's got a dark wing. So again, using your dark pastel or a dark pencil, marking that in like that. This other fella, do his shadow. So his shadow is about there. And then it kind of fades off as it comes forward. I'm not near enough to see that, I think. The bottom of them has more shadow too, because obviously that's not in the light, but it's a bit tricky to get into it. This is the challenge with pastels, is doing fine work and being able to make it work. It is possible. It takes a bit of practice. Just going to tip off my dust. So you can see in front of this guy, the first guy in front here, got a big dirty fingerprint in the water. So I had to get rid of that. So I'm just going to use the eraser and just dab it. Don't rub it because you'll push it in, but just dab it gently and lift up that pigment. Still a bit of a mess there, and push now and kind of blend that around and smooth it off. Cool. Touch up his little head. Now I've got these red beaks. Do we want to try a red beak? Why not? I'm going to find a red pencil. Purple was the best of the time, so I'm just going to use this purple pencil, it's like a magenta. Do just a tiny little bit of a beak on there. We give this fella a shadow. See what happens. The legs need a bit more defining. I'm not sure if I'm going to get a sharp enough mark with this, but let's give it a crack. Not too bad. That'll do. It's going to lighten up a touch on the back of this guy's head. So fiddly, very fiddly, and tricky. Of dust. They're not very precise, but we know what they are, kind of. And dab them in a little bit. And then we'll do this bottom corner. So it's got that lovely dark sandbank in here. Remember, we put a bit of pink there before, but it's disappeared now. So we can put some back. If I put the pink in, it might go purpley, which is quite nice. So let's see. Yeah, that's nice. So the pink and the blue are blending together, and the pastels will blend with each other. You don't always have to use your fingers. But that'll give me a lovely, lovely edge to that section there where the water's coming into the sand. So it's nice to have that purple kind of tinge where the sand's wet but hasn't got the water on it. So now we're just pushing this section here. Lovely. Tip off the dust. Clean this up, get my fingerprints off it. Very good. Just going to lighten up this fella's little top of his head a bit. So use a bit more light there. Oh, no, that's too much. Whiten it down. This is a little rubber tip blender. They also come in very handy. It's lighter, but it's not that light. Still looks too dark. I know what the problem is. It needs more dark underneath it where the face is. So maybe just under here, darken up a bit and make a bit of a beak. Anyway, stop fiddling because you ruin them otherwise. Lovely. All right. So that's it. That's our little painting of seagulls on the beach. Beautiful. I hope you enjoyed this class, and if you want to do some more, there's heaps on my website. You can go and have a look at my website, which is up here on the top left, deliciousart.com.au. And there's heaps of videos there to look at and download. They're $15 each, which is very affordable. And most of them are at least 2 hours long, so you get a really good class, just like this one. All right. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you had a good time, and do send me photos of your artwork. I'd love to see how you went, and I will catch up with you next time. Have a great day. Bye for now.